Coming up on this episode of Shutter Nonsense with Michael Rung and Jeffrey Tadlock.
So that is certainly a case of where if you didn't have the spare, your day is over. But with a spare, they were able to just toss it in, and at least it didn't ruin their trip.
So I ended up hiking like an extra mile up trying to find him, and did he slip and like is this worst case scenario?
Right.
Did he slip and fall in the stream and get swept away?
And that's super smart. I am not that smart, and I usually have to play, let's try to spin the wheel.
Literally, if I don't have these with me, it's one of my greatest fears. This is the one thing I always triple check. When we're starting out, just like anything you read, you got to have the best. You got to have this, you got to have that. The common trope is you got to have the fastest glass you can get. But honestly,
the other thing Maven did was they did a combined ND and CPL filter. So I have a 3-stop dark CPL, and essentially it's a 3-stop ND filter combined with a CPL. So you put it on, you get the ND effect, and then you rotate it just like you would a CPL.
all right. I'm more nervous about this one than the first one.
I know. It's a lot.
Now we've got like actual plans.
Exactly. It's like, can we follow it?
All right, let's just kick into this thing. So welcome to episode 2 of Shutter Nonsense. As a refresher, my name is Michael Rung. I'm here with my cohort, Jeffrey Tadlock.
Hello,
everybody.
everybody.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you there, buddy.
Yeah, you're all good.
I would say this is the podcast about nature photography and maybe a little bit of photography in general, where the conversation is quite casual. And typos are definitely a problem with this particular podcast name, as I've caught myself a few times. So on that note, today's episode is going to be centered around some takeaways, both from our years of experience, as well as I think some observations and things we ran into, again, on our recent workshop in the Smoky Mountains with a group of clients, relating to what we carry in our camera bag, from the basics, the bare essentials, to hey, these are some of the nice to haves, as well as things to consider carrying from an emergency standpoint. So we'll get into that in just a bit, but to start this off, I thought, Jeffrey, why don't we kick it over to you real quickly? And part of this podcast is also just to kind of talk about what we've been up to, what we're working on from a photography standpoint. I think as we said in the first episode, kind of what you saw in Creative Banter with Ben Horn and Cody Schultz, just kind of that casual chat. So I'll kick it over to you, and you can share what you want to share.
Yeah, great. So let's see. Last week I ran another group workshop. It was one of my one-day workshop. It's the one I've been running for the longest period of time down in my local region, Hocking Hills. That was a good workshop. It runs a full day, and we visit various waterfalls. And this particular group had a lot of emphasis on composition, how to make the scenes interesting, as well as just how to get that water effect with the water to sort of slow the shutter down and figure out where you want it. So just sort of going over the basic exposure settings and how to get to that shutter speed you want. But it was a great workshop. It was another one of those, as you know, in the Smoky Mountains, we dodged the weather frequently, dodging rain showers, thunder showers, and everything like that.
For the most part.
Hocking Hills was exactly. We did pretty good for the most part on that one. Hocking Hills was very similar. It was supposed to be rainy. It was looking like it was going to be rainy, but the weather broke for the morning and the early afternoon and didn't get hit with the heavy downpour until about 10 minutes after the workshop ended. So that worked out pretty well on that front. So great workshop there. That turns my attention towards my West Virginia workshop coming up early October. That's a multi-day workshop as well. I have a couple spots open on that, but I'll be starting to put some attention to fill in the rest of those seats. Great area to visit out there, waterfalls, overlooks, and just some really unique terrain for east of the Mississippi. And that's pretty much it. How about you, Michael? What have you been up to since we last talked?
Well, let me back it up here a second. Any new YouTube videos? You just released one after we got back, didn't you?
I did. So I've actually released a couple videos. Let's focus on I did 3 lessons from the Smoky Mountains, and it's where I sort of took things I think you and I saw as recurring themes from that particular workshop and sort of highlighted those in the video. Just sort of, like I said, it wasn't so much the technical part of the workshop or anything like that. It was just more of those underlying foundational themes that I think were takeaways from that workshop. So I did release that, and it's out on my YouTube channel now, called The 3 Lessons from the Smoky Mountains.
So there you go. Go watch Jeffrey's new video. I have not done a single video. It's been a minute since my last, I put a video out, my snowy Eagle Mountain at my local park.
Yes.
I put that video out not too long before the Smoky Mountains workshop. So anyways, I am so neglectful of my YouTube channel these days. As far as what I have been working on, obviously coming back from the Smoky Mountains, I've got a ton of files. I think I ended up with I know it was over 2,500. It was like 2,532 files or something. Not a lot of that was shooting handheld and burst and exposure bracketing and focus bracketing and, lots of multiple shots of cascading water to try to get the texture I wanted and everything. So I've been through my 3 rounds of culling. I think I got it down to 130 candidates for editing. And again, some of those are kind of, they're not straight up duplicates, but maybe variations of the same scene that, at the end of the day, I'm not going to spend all my time culling. So I just kind of call it a day when I get to a certain point, and we'll get into the editing suite with Lightroom and see where we go from there. Done a little bit of work on that. Like I said, I got the culling done at least. I think I've got actually, out of 130, it's not much, but I want to say I've got 5 to 7 images, probably mostly done or most of the way to done. So plenty of work there to do. I'm way behind on my next folio collection. They're not quite box sets, although going forward, it's going to be a little bit of a change from what I've done to date. So the first 2 folios I've done were paper folios, very, very thin. If you're familiar with Ben Horn's folios that he's been doing the last few years, it's actually the same, and including 10 of my fine art prints in there and setting it as a limited edition, which they've done fairly well. Nothing setting the world on fire, because I know it's going to be a slow burn. But for this one, after much back and forth and having other priorities of life and the business come up in the way, I finally settled on I'm doing an actual box set. It's still a relatively thin box, but it's a 3/4 inch box from the same manufacturer, Tyndall Photographic. So in addition to that, I'm bumping it from 10 prints to 12, which is where the paper folio always kind of limited me with that fine art paper that I use, the Red River Palo Duro Etching 315. It's a very thick paper. And I was basically maxed out with 10 prints in the old paper folio. So now I've got a little bit of flexibility, embracing that by including 2 additional prints. So that's been kind of one of my bigger focuses this week. I just ordered the folios finally 2 days ago. So hopefully I have those early next week. I'm working on you can't see them, but I've got proofing prints run off behind me here. So I've been doing some of that work too. I feel like I've got 30 other things I'm juggling, but the biggies are the box set for sure. And then starting to work on my my Smoky Mountain files. Speaking of which, have you worked on yours at all? I don't think we've talked about it.
I did a couple. I haven't done a full calling run. I went through and highlighted a couple things to go with the video that I put out on the 3 lessons, just because I needed some supporting images. So they were sort of quick edits just for the video. So I want to say around 4 or 5 edited loosely. They need another pass before I would actually put them in too many places, but they were there for the video. So I did go through that, but I didn't get quite as many images as you, but I think I was sitting around 1,800 or so images I brought back, similar to you. Okay. Some of that was focus stacking, handheld, where you're photographing more than one or something like that. But yeah. We'll see how I get through the calling process. But I feel pretty happy with the trip, with what I came away with. So
I'm actually... looking at the 130 candidates I've got for editing right now, I wouldn't be shocked if I'm not pushing 100 that I may end up eventually releasing, which sounds ridiculous. But there's so much variety there. And I would say the difference between your file count and my file count is I actually took behind the scenes photos, unlike somebody else I know.
I have some behind the scenes. I just haven't edited those either. I do have a handful, probably not as many behind the scene photos as you do. But I do have a few that I took that you didn't know I was taking. So
okay.
I've just got to get them out there.
Probably when I was at my worst.
No, they're good. They're good.
So for the audience, the one photo I've seen so far of behind the scenes of me is me standing next to Jeffrey as he makes tea and coffee. So not even me doing anything. Oh no, there is the one you took as a joke because I was showing somebody how to photograph bark. So,
yes, and we know how much you love the photograph bark. So
that's a whole other side story we'll save for another day for the audience. I got nothing against bark. Yeah. I have something against some types of photos of bark, but anyways, we'll leave that as a teaser. So anyways, enough of that. And again,
before you leave your folios too much, just to put that out there, that box set should be pretty interesting. I'm anxious to see that. One of the early, I forget how long ago I've actually known you. We met, through an online community, but I purchased one of your first folio set, and it was just really well done. So if people are interested, I can vouch for the quality of workmanship. I bought this before Michael and I were really collaborating on anything, or it was pretty early on to knowing him.
I did not bribe him or schmooze him.
Exactly, he did not, but It's a really well put together set, high quality paper. The presentation is Apple like, which I think is always a good thing. It's just very well presented. So if you're looking to build your print collection or something like that, keep an eye at both either on the folios that Michael already has out, and keep an eye on that box set, because like I said, he puts a lot of time and energy into it, and it's not a half-baked release. It's very good, and there's really great imagery in it and just really well put together. So just to toss that in there.
Well, thank you. I honestly, I totally forgot, and you bought that first edition. So yeah, there's
I was
hopefully
early
seen
supporter.
as unbunbiased early supporter.
I think its value is going up. It's an investment.
I appreciate that. I will see about that. But kind of on that note, though, I do have editions left of Volume 1 and Volume 2. One of the things I'm changing with Volume 3 as well, I did tiered pricing on the first two, so that as they sold through a certain amount, the price would go up. For the third one, I'm just doing one flat price, but I'm also reducing the edition count from 50 down to 25. Partly because, like I said, the demand hasn't been quite what I'd hoped. And honestly, I haven't really promoted and advertised them quite as much as I probably could. But also, since I'm switching from the paper folio, which when they come, they are flat in a box, so very minimal storage, now going in an actual collector's box. As you might be able to tell if you're watching this on video, I don't have a ton of space in my 10-foot by 10-foot office. So I'm making that consideration in terms of a storage standpoint too. So if they sell through quickly, then Volume 4, maybe we'll go back up to 50, but we'll go with 25 this time. So thank you for that unsolicited advocacy for my print collection. I definitely appreciate that. So with that out of the way, and actually one quick note before we move into the actual topic of this podcast or this episode, I would say, again, we talked about it in episode 1. If you got feedback, if this little like, hey, what are you up to? What have you been working on kind of thing? If this is going on too long, you want more of it, less of it, a different take on it, again, give us the feedback. And, we want this to be a collaborative effort with our listeners and our viewers. So if you got feedback, ideas, whatever, don't be shy to share it with us. So that out of the way, let's talk about what's in your bag. Or as I keep thinking of the 7 meme, what's in that bag?
Yes. What's in the box?
So, you and I talked about this the other day and kind of planning this episode out, but you've got the basics, of course. And one of the first questions you get from any potential workshop attendee, and I've had this just from, one-on-one questions with my own folks here in my local park or whatever, is what lenses do I need to bring? Now, of course,
right.
The joke on the workshop is kind of similar to the joke on the Discord server Jeffrey and I hang out on, but my answers tend to fall under it depends a lot.
For sure.
Obviously, depending on where you're going and what types of scenes you want to photograph and everything. But for me personally, I try to cover the whole gamut of what I might need, even though I may use one lens 70% of the time. I want to make sure I've got the flexibility readily at hand, so to speak. And it doesn't mean that everybody's got to have every lens and cover the whole thing. I personally carry my Canon RF 14-35. It's an f4 lens, so it's nice and small and compact. I've also got the Canon 24-105, also f4 lens. Uses the same front filter size, 77 millimeters, so I'm not having to worry about different filter sizes. And then the third lens I always carry with me, and is the one I use the most, as Jeffrey saw firsthand in Tennessee at Smoky Mountains, is my 100-500. It is a variable aperture given the length of the focal length on it. But the nice thing with the Canon lenses and that kind of trifecta I'm carrying is they're all 77 millimeter front element threads. So I've got one set of filters that works on every single lens that I carry with me. That way I'm covering myself from 14 millimeter all the way up to 500 millimeter. And no matter what kind of scene I come across, I'm good to go.
Yeah,
I would say
super
just,
nice.
Yeah,
on that filter size piece is super.
Yeah,
nice.
that is actually one of the reasons why I've been wanting the 100-500. I had the Tamron 100-400, the old EF lens, and I was using it with the adapter mount for the Canon mirrorless, but it was a 67 millimeter front thread. So I still had to carry adapter rings and, go through all that junk. And I'm lazy and I don't like to carry extra stuff. So it's nice having everything under one, what's the word? Filter size. That's the phrase I'm going for. So what do you carry? I know you've got the 100-400. What else you got in your bag?
Yep. So I'm very similar to you. I like to have that as much focal length range as I can. So I carry the Nikon 14-30, also a f4 lens. Nikon makes a 14-24, which is a f2.8, but I don't, and it's a very high quality lens, but I used a 14-30 because the 2.8's heavier, it's bigger, and its filter, because it's got the bulging lens element in the front, it uses a special adapter, and you get into 110 millimeter filter size to be able to put on front. So I just find it super awkward, and anyone that follows my YouTube channel knows I like to keep things as compact and as I can, just because of the hiking and the typo work that we do. So I opt for the 14-30, which is also a great lens, f4 lens. That covers my wide side. And then on the mid, I'm a 24-120, great lens from Nikon. That covers my midsection. Nice and versatile. It's nice that it can hit the 24 all the way up to 120. And then the 100-400 on the zoom side, the telephoto side, which it is the Nikon 100-400. I wish I could get out to 500 with that. Like, I wish Nikon had the 100-500 millimeter lens. I feel like that's a nice sweet spot. And as I've gotten to see more in that 100-400 focal length, I could see myself wanting that extra 100 millimeters. I'm sure, like I said, I'm a little jealous of that. But it's a great lens. I cover 14-400 pretty easily. It doesn't take a lot of space in the pack. The 100-400 weighs the most. And like we were just touching on before, the downside is our filter sizes are different. So I run 82 millimeter filters, which covers my wide lens, but then I have to use step-up rings on my mid and my telephoto to adapt. It's not terrible. I just leave them on and you get used to it. But there is something to be said for just one filter size with no step-up rings or anything to work through that. So I'm a little jealous there as well. But that's my setup. Those are my 3 standard carry lenses on a photography trip.
Yeah. So you carry 3 lenses. I carry 3 lenses. If you had to leave one lens at home, which one would it be?
Usually it's actually going to, it depends just to do that. But my default, most often right answer would be I would probably leave the 14-30 home, just because I don't break that one out very often. That 24-120 gets pretty wide, which limits how often I really need to break out the 14-30. And I would miss the 100-400 if I didn't have it with me. So it's the 14-30 that would tend to get left home if I'm dropping one of those lenses.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. So before I had the Canon 14-35, I was rocking the Tamron EF 15-30 millimeter, and it had 2 marks against it. It was an f2.8, so it was huge. It was heavy. It had the bulbous front element, like you were talking about. So honestly, for the better part of 2-3 years, the thing stayed at home more often than not. I didn't shoot in those wider angles a whole lot, and B, it was just such a pain to carry around. It was in terms of just sheer like girth, snicker. In terms of the diameter,
they're going to censor this. They're going to put us as the adult podcast now.
It was the bulkiest lens that I could carry. So even just working with it in the bag, it fit okay, but it was just awkward. And then, the weight of it. And I think that's one interesting fact. And I don't want to go on too many side tangents, but I think this one's worth touching on. You mentioned you had 2.8 glass. I started out, even when I was still on a crop sensor, as I started upgrading my lenses, everything was 2.8. I had the 2.8 15-30 from Tamron. My whole lineup was Tamron. So I had their 15-30. I had their f2.8 24-70, and I had their 2.8 70-200. And that was my kit until I got the 100-400 in 2020. And I think most nature photographers, at least from my perspective, that's kind of a similar path that we all seem to have taken, where when we're starting out, just like anything you read, you got to have the best. You got to have this. You got to have that. And a common trope is you got to have, the fastest glass you can get. And certainly that's valid if, you're shooting Milky Way or night skies or something like that, or you tend to shoot in really low light and you just want to minimize the amount of shutter speed you need. But honestly, since ditching all of the 2.8 and going with the f4 glass and then obviously the 100-500, I don't miss it at all, especially these days with how good cameras are at higher ISOs. And then you've got the fantastic AI denoising technology, whether the Adobe version built into Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw or Topaz or what have you. I don't miss the 2.8. And I stopped photographing night sky stuff several years ago, really. So for me personally, the trade-off of, well, maybe you lose some of that low light performance, and I could do Astro with f4, but again, I don't really. Having the size advantage and the weight advantage of the f4 glass, to me, more than makes up that loss. And frankly, if I ever wanted to do a night sky session, I'd probably know that ahead. And I've still got my Tamron 24 to 72.8. I could bring that, or push come shove. Worst case scenarios, I rent one for as little as I use it. It'd probably be worth it. So and then like I said, you mentioned, was it just your widest that was a 2.8, or did you kind of do the same?
So my wide is, I actually don't own the 14 to 24 from Nikon, which is the 2.8, but it was a conscious decision. I didn't want to go that route because the f4 was going to work. And on that 2.8 note, I mean, I've previous life shot portraits and events, so I still own my 24 to 70 and 70 to 200 2.8 lenses, but they never go out in landscape photography for me. They are pretty much dedicated to events and portraits where then there is a case for it. But for my landscape stuff, I have zero regrets and leave those 2.8s at home just because, like you said, they're a little smaller, so you can get more in your pack. They weigh a little less, which to me lets you hike further and not be tired when you get there, so you can focus on the photography. And I have zero regrets at building my kit around an f4 or higher speed lenses and stuff, which works great for me.
Same here. All right, so I think we've talked plenty about lenses. It does go back to an extent of the location you're going to and what you're going to be shooting, but I tend to carry all three of those. And again, it sounds like we're both on the same page. If we were to leave one behind, it'd be our widest.
What if and I agreed, I don't want to spend too long on lenses, but say you were going somewhere and you were going as light as possible and you could just take one lens, you had to leave two. So instead of just what you asked me, you're going to drop one lens. Now you can only take one lens. Is it something you already carry, or do you have a different lens you swap in, or what would you take?
Wouldn't it be a different lens from what I already carry? I know the theoretical question here is if I needed to go as light as I could. But I'd be inclined to say the 100 or 500 just because I shoot with that by far more than anything. If my hand was really, really forced, I'd probably opt for the 24 to 105 though. It's got that good mid-range. You can use it for wider landscapes still, but you can also use it for closer up shots, like, in streams of the Smoky Mountains, or, tighter woodland photography, depending on the layout of the land and things like that. And again, shooting with the R5 and 45 megapixels, you can always crop. I can always throw the camera into crop mode and get another 60% reach. So on the 105, that take me up to, call it 160 mil on crop mode on the camera. So it's nowhere near the 100 or 500, but if I was absolutely going for like the lightest kit with only one lens, I can make an argument for the 24 to 105, but I would prefer the 100 500.
I'm very similar. I would go through the same thought process as you did, and I would end up with a 24 to 120 if it was just one lens. For the very reasons you said, I shoot the Nikon Z7 II, so I have 45 megapixels to play with, so I've got some crop room to help out. I could switch into DX mode, so I would do 24 to 120 if I was only taking one lens, probably. But I have a feeling I would have some, and I agree, because I would, especially if I was headed out west, and maybe that would change my factor a little bit, where I had those bigger views here on the East Coast. As you know, from the Smokies, yes, there are 100 to 400 scenes, but there's also a lot of streams, a lot of closer up scenes where a mid works out really well. But so I'm sure there would be a scene where I was like, man, I really wish I had my 100 to 400, but I would probably go 24 120.
Yeah, I think if I did the 24 to 105 only, I would probably be far less productive. It's harder to pick out harder or impossible to pick out all the little distant, detail scenes and compositions that are out there. All right, enough about lenses. So
yes,
we've talked about that. One thing, I think our clients did pretty well with it, but I think we did have to loan them a couple here and there, microfiber cloths and towels, especially if you're going near a stream or a waterfall or there's rainy conditions. And, we had a lot of questions about the weather sealing for the cameras that the different folks had. Now, I shoot with the R5. You've got the Canon Z line, which are both, I know the Nikon R5 sorry. You know what I meant.
I know what you meant.
That other brand. But anyways, the R5
exactly.
is one of Canon's best rated water and dust sealed systems. all the lenses I've got are water and dust sealed, and I think you're in the same boat. Even
Yep,
when I was
same boat.
shooting with, I've got right back here behind me, even when I was shooting with my old Canon R, the original mirrorless, it's not officially rated at the same level, but I use that thing, not torrential downpours, but I would use it in light rain, and I've used it in snow. And, I think as we kind of gave the disclaimer to the workshop folks, like, hey, I'm not going to make you any promises, but odds are just about any camera is going to be okay with a little bit of moisture. Now, the lenses, I think you got to be a little more careful with, especially the barrel lenses that, the barrel
Right.
extends out because you can suck water back in on some of the cheaper ones that aren't maybe as effectively sealed, which again is partly why, going back to when I switched to the 100 to 400 5 years ago, I went with the Tamron over the Canon RF 100 to 400 because the Canon's not weather and dust sealed as well as the Tamron is.
Mm-hmm.
So especially the lenses, I think is probably your bigger failure point or point of concern. And that's where having the microfiber, the cloth really is going to be for the front lens element. The towel, though, is so that you can wipe your gear off every so often, either while it's actively, drizzling or misting or whatever. And also, obviously, before you put it back in your bag, just give it I would just give it a quick wipe down and get the bulk of the moisture off. The other nice thing with the towel is, I don't have a huge towel. Actually, I conveniently have my bag sitting open behind me, but, this is the towel I carry.
Yep.
For those of you
Very
watching.
similar to the one I carry.
So what is that? Maybe 8" by 8" if that. But I'll actually drape this thing over my front element if I'm not using a lens hood, or like my 24 to 105, and especially the 14 to 35. The lens hood really isn't going to keep water off of the front element. So I'll just drape the towel over the front of it, and when I'm ready to take the shot, pull it off, take the shot, put it back on. That way I'm not constantly having to wipe off moisture and condensation off the front of the my Lord, my words are escaping me. The lens, the front of the lens.
Yes.
That's the word.
My microfiber cloth towel approach is pretty much just like yours. They're important, and I carry both the one for the front lens element and then the towel to either drape or wipe it off before you put it away. And I have similar experience with, while I won't tell people, yes, you can take your non-weather sealed camera out into the elements, I have certainly done so myself many a times and not suffered any huge ill effect. But I always warn people, maybe I was lucky, maybe I just wasn't right spot. But I do think cameras are more robust than you think. But either way, in either case, weather sealed or not, microfiber cloths and towels are good.
It'll likely be okay, but would make no promises.
Right, exactly. There's at your own risk.
Right.
But that's been our experience anyways. Other things to bring, there's always the spares, there's little things that you forget. So like spare batteries. I know making the jump from DSLR to mirrorless, it was a new world for battery life for me. DSLRs would last seemingly forever, whereas the mirrorless chews through a little more. For me, I think it's because I tend to, it's got the EVF, and then I tend to use the LCD more than the viewfinder a lot of times when I'm on mirrorless for some reason. So spare batteries are good. I've seen too many times. Even on workshops, I've happened to have a spare battery that fit a person's camera, and I've had loan them. But spare batteries is definitely important while you're out there. If you're doing long exposures, it chews up battery faster than you might otherwise. So making sure to have spare batteries with you, I think, is important to have in your bag. And so I always try to have some extra batteries with me as well.
And a pro tip on that one too, if I can reach it. My audio is probably faded out there. So I carry 2 packets for those of you on video. I've got 2, not packets, but pouches, whatever you want to call them, for my batteries. So the one with the blue stripe indicates that these are my good, ready to go batteries that are fully charged. As they die, I put them into the gray stripe pouch, and that way I know these are the ones I need to charge up when I get back to the truck. So I've got chargers plugged into my Jackery, or when I get back to hotel room, wherever we're going. But this is coming really, really handy because I used to just throw them in my bag, and then I'd be sitting there looking, okay, which ones are charged, which ones aren't charged. So a little pro tip, got these on Amazon dirt cheap. You can find them for different manufacturers. For those of you not watching the video, they're just little Velcro pouches. They each have 4 battery pockets, and like I said, one's blue, one's gray. That way I can make a determination of which is my charged up set and which is my dead and needing to be charged set.
Yeah, that's super smart. I am not that smart, and I usually have to play Let's try. Let's spin the wheel. Did I grab a charged battery or a dead battery? Type
Definitely
thing.
used
So
to do that. Definitely used to do that.
I may have to go look for some of those pouches. Make that.
And speaking of spare batteries, we actually have a story related to this from our workshop on our last morning. Do you remember what happened?
I do. Yes, I do. I do. So we're down by this creek, and it had been rainy that morning, so all the rocks were slippery. And this particular rock, while it didn't look slippery, was certainly slippery, and someone slipped, and luckily kept from falling into the fast-moving water. But their battery had popped out of their camera, and they did lose the battery to the water on that particular one. So that is certainly a case of where if you didn't have the spare, your day is over. But with a spare, they were able to just toss it in, and it was, lost a battery, but at least it didn't ruin their trip from that standpoint. So,
and I think that's where a lot of the items that we're going to talk about here, it's not that you're going to need it every day or every time. You might be going out and say, I'm only going to be out for an hour. I don't need spare batteries. But then something like that happens, you slip and fall, and the battery happened, the door somehow popped open, and the battery went and is somewhere in a stream in the Tremont area of Smoky Mountains Park. Or you trip and fall, and the same thing happens, and you tumbles down a cliff or whatever. It's always those unknowns that, hey, just make sure you at least got some form of backup equipment, so you're not going to be just totally SOL if something unexpected and kooky. I mean, that was really just a freak thing. You know, slipping, we've all slipped and fallen, but I've never seen a battery door pop open and the battery go flying out. So just one of those freak accidents, but he had spares, so he was still good to go. The other thing we ran into on the workshop was around tripods. So we had one client that had what's the brand? I'm forgetting what
the
different.
Black Rapid camera strap is how they tended to carry their camera
that
around,
one.
so.
I was thinking of the tripod itself, Manfrotto.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah,
Which is
yes. She showed up one morning and she had the tripod, but she left the mount for the tripod back at her hotel, which that particular brand of tripods has a proprietary tripod mount. So she couldn't just borrow like one of our Arca Swiss plates or whatever. Fortunately, I had my older backup tripod with me and a head as well. So we were able to put the Arca Swiss plate on that and she was good to go. But there's another example of just one of those off the wall things. Mm-hmm. For some reason you took it off, maybe it loosened or I don't know, whatever reason you might take it off, misplace it, forget it, got a spare in your bag, you're good to go in that regard. That's another scenario where if I hadn't had the backup tripod and ball head for her, she wouldn't have had a tripod that day unless she skipped the morning session and either borrowed somebody's car or had somebody take her back to get it. So another example of kind of just one of those, you don't necessarily think it's going to happen, but maybe it will.
And it happens more often than you'd think. I had just on my most recent Hocking Hills workshop, they had a tripod. It was an Arca Swiss tripod, but for some reason their plate was not on the camera. I don't know if they'd switched it or what, but the plate wasn't there. But I carry spare Arca Swiss plates, and so it really wasn't a big deal. I was like, oh, cool, let's just pop this on your camera, and you're good to go. But there's just 2 workshops in a row that you and I have been involved with in some form or fashion that having a spare plate or a spare setup enabled the person to go out and get their pictures and photograph. So it's uncanny how often that particular one seems to happen.
You never know. And I almost did it to myself. This is the first trip I've been on, first big trip I've been on where I've had 2 R5s. So again, I was shooting with the R. That became my backup when I upgraded to the R5. And during Canon's holiday sale, I bit the bullet and went ahead and bought a second refurbished R5, which now with tariff uncertainty, maybe that was a great move on my part.
Right.
But I didn't have the L bracket for it. And it was like, I think 6 days before I would have been leaving for the trip, I was starting to get things organized. And I had that, oh crap, epiphany of I don't have my L bracket, which meant I would have been relying on my backup Arca Swiss mount plate at the very least. And I would have been sad because I wouldn't have had the convenience of the L bracket, which we'll talk a little bit more about in just a second too. What's the other thing we have on here? Allen wrenches. Going back to mounting your tripod brackets to your camera, tightening your tripod legs or other components of the tripod. One nice thing, I don't know if it's on this one, on my R5 L brackets, I keep turning away from the microphone. On my R5 L brackets, so there's actually an Allen wrench that clips in magnetically to the L bracket itself. So if the L bracket loosens up, I know I've always got that, but I also carry, and I'm not going to bother digging it out of my bag, but it's a full set of Allen wrenches that are, everything from the thinnest of the thin to, I don't know, maybe a 1/4 inch Allen wrench set.
Yep.
And, those come in handy from anything and everything to random accessories, stuff in my truck I've used them on. You just never know. So again, it's kind of
loose
a nice
tripod
thing to have.
legs.
Yeah, exactly.
If a tripod legs gets loose, it's some tripods tend to that, so it's nice to be able to just tighten it up and get the wiggle out of it. So yeah, super handy for those.
Again, it's not something I need all the time, but it's nice to have. The next one, we've got a section where we'll talk through some emergency preparedness. And we almost put this next one in there, but we decided it's really something you should just always carry. Is a headlamp. In my case, a headlamp with good batteries. I keep a spare headlamp in the truck all the time, mostly for using when I'm at camp, so I'm not having to dig it out of my camera bag, but I happened to pull it out and the batteries were half dead, so I could barely see what I was doing anyways. But I know the headlamp I use in my camera bag runs on AAAs, which on one hand is nice because if it dies, I can just pop in some new AAAs and I'm good to go. I think you were telling me, though, you've got one that charges, but also you can also put AAAs in it, right?
Yeah, so I've got a Petzl headlamp. It's the one that stays in my camera bag, and it comes with a rechargeable battery, so I can recharge it. And the downside is it's micro USB and not USB-C. I couldn't find a Petzl that had the USB-C when I bought mine, but it's rechargeable. But if I'm out and burning through batteries or the rechargeable dies or something like that, you can pop the rechargeable out, and it's slotted to take in 3 AAAs. So I also have the option of swinging by, grabbing 3 AAAs or keeping them in a 4Runner and being able to do it that way. So I really like the versatility of that just because it plays into that whole backup redundancy thing. It's like, something wrong with the rechargeable. I can, or don't have a quick means to recharge it. I might have AAAs I can just pop in there to get me through. But the headlamps are super handy for those early morning sunrises to hike up the trail in the dark, and same for those sunsets when you're out past into the dark, and being able to have those to come back with. So I always keep a headlamp in my camera bag.
Yep. And again, even if you don't think you're going to be out late, you never know. I mean, if I'm going to my local park in the morning, I know I'm not going to need it, but it's still in my bag. But in the case of, like, again, being in the Smokies or my trips to Colorado or Utah or wherever, I may be going out for sunset and thinking, I'm not going to be out until it gets dark, but then maybe I don't think through the fact that I've got to hike a few miles back or, whatever. Right. So always have that there. And I love that idea of having the option to either charge it or throw the batteries. And that's really the main reason I haven't switched to a ideally USB-C chargeable headlamp is I've always had that anxiety about, well, what if I forget to charge it up or it dies quicker than expected? It's really cold out or something. Then I've got no backup plan. Whereas with the one I've got now, I just throw batteries, and you've got the flexibility of either one. So I might have to get that link from you.
Yeah,
see if I can find
it's super
an
nice.
updated
I like
version.
it.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Served me well.
Spare memory cards. Again, this is something else that popped up on our workshop, I think second to last day, with actually the same guy that lost the battery. But he started having issues with the camera was throwing an error message. I don't think it was failure to write to card or something. It was some kind of unusual error message it was throwing. And from what I understand, he swapped out to a different memory card and good to go. Again, it wasn't because the card was full. He technically didn't need to have that backup card with him, but the unexpected happened, and he was prepared and had himself covered for that type of scenario. So again, as I said, all of these things, or many of these things on here, are not expected to be used all the time, but thinking through the what ifs, those rare what if scenarios. I've got just a little plastic clamshell case. The nice thing about mine, I guess I can pull it out, is, again, for those of you on video, I can just hold it up, but one side, it's got kind of this like rubber gasket on it, which is conveniently red. So the ones that I know have good files on them, I put them on the red side. The ones that I know are good to go and I can format them, clear them off, are on the black side. And that way I'm keeping it organized in terms of not accidentally overwriting or formatting data that I want to keep. Just make that determination of, okay, I'm going to put all of my cards that I need to protect and I need to back up on that red side, and then the black side is the ones that are good to go. So just another little pro tip there that I've learned over the years, because I did accidentally, thankfully, It was a card that had nothing important on it. It was just a few shots I think I had taken on a previous outing that wasn't very fruitful, but I wasn't thinking. I grabbed the card, put it in, formatted it, and then I had that epiphany of, oh crap, I just overwrote a couple of files. So again, sometimes it takes that hard lesson learned to think of a better way to do it. So
I have it so ingrained in me from my portrait and event days that I'm so careful with cards and like verifying that data exists somewhere else, because then it was, landscape photography, it's annoying enough, especially if it was a big trip, right? And you just lost a whole trip's worth of photos. But so I have pretty strict guidelines for when I will format a card and lots of extra cards to help prevent. But yeah, that's got to be a terrible feeling to accidentally wipe a card.
Oh, imagine if you did that with 100 files on it or something, or from a trip you just got back from, and then you went out locally, or you just weren't thinking, and once you format it and start taking photos, there's really no way to recover it. If you format it and you haven't put any new files on it, you might be able to recover the data, but odds are if you've done that, you're not going to realize it. And again, once you start shooting, you're pretty much out of luck. All right. So we talked about it a little bit, but filters, and I know you and I are pretty similar in this as well. We have different brands. I carry case filters. I did go with the Wolverine. I went with the Skyview series, which is, I guess you would call it their basic lineup. But as far as what I was able to find in my research, the only difference is they're cheaper. They're not as shadow resistant. So it was a balancing game between cost versus, I know I'm pretty careful with my stuff. I guess you could say in this regard, I'm not accounting for those unexpected, events that may occur, and I wouldn't have a contingency plan in place if I did accidentally drop one and it shattered. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. I opted to go with the Skyviews. Basically the same great color accuracy. You're not getting weird color cast or anything like that. But for me, magnetic. And magnetic, yes. That's one thing definitely I think is worth mentioning. So specifically, I know you and I talked about it. We both basically keep CPLs on our lenses at all times.
Yes.
It's very rare for me to take them off. Even when it's not doing anything, I just leave it on. That way I know it's always there as often as I do use them. But yeah, the magnetic piece, and I'll let you talk to this. You've got the Maven set as well, which I really did like the setup of that. Magnetic filters are game changers, and I'll let you talk to that piece a little bit.
Yep. So I used the Maven magnetic filters. They were one of the first ones with color coding. Again, they're magnetic, and once you go magnetic filters, it makes you so efficient in the field. And a lot of these tips are about being efficient in the field. Magnetic really helps with that. But the Maven filters are color coded, so it's super easy to look at however you're storing them in a pouch, in a bag, or anything like that. And or if you do what I do, and sometimes leave a filter in the lens and wonder where did I leave that filter. Because they're color coded, it's super easy. Oh, it's on the 100 to 400, and grab it.
And my case are magnetic too, and I love my case filters. I have no complaints with the case filters, other than sometimes like I've got the magnetic lens caps as well, which is also super convenient. And sometimes the CPL will come off with the lens cap, and I've gotten to the point now where I just know how to kind of get my fingernail in there and kind of hold the CPL to the lens front while I get the cap off. So really no complaints. Like I said, they're great. There's no color casting or anything like that. No, I really haven't had issues with flaring with them. But I did really like the Mavens that you were rocking, just simply for that color coding factor. I don't use the ND filters a ton, but my other beef with the case, and actually as I was tidying my office before this, again, I moved away from the microphone. As I was tidying my office before this, case has, instead of labeling their filters with stops, it's the ND32, ND64, ND1000, which I know, Jeffrey, I think you have this memorized in terms of how that equates in stops. I don't. So for me, it's more of I think for this scene, I need a little bit of ND, so I'll grab my lightest one. And I don't typically go above that anyways, but that is one complaint I have with the case, is that they don't just put the stops on the edges of the actual filters. Yep.
And it sounds weird, but I do think better in stops than I do the ND8 and D64 and all of that. I mean, I can do the mental juggle in the head, but it is super nice. The other thing Maven did was, and I do use this filter a lot, is they did a combined ND and CPL filter. So, and my favorite one to use of those, I have a 3-stop dark CPL, and essentially it's a 3-stop ND filter combined with a CPL in like one pane of glass. So you put it on, you get the ND effect, and then you rotate it just like you would a CPL. And I find I like to photograph a lot of waterfalls, and I find it's a very handy filter for that. And the advantage is it helps reduce vignetting if it happens to be on your widest lens. So on my 14-30, if I put a dark CPL on, I minimize any vignetting. I'd get where I normally would have to stack a filter to get that effect, and I get the vignetting. So another cool little thing Maven's done with those combined ND and CPL filters.
Yeah, that would be nice
cool
to have, actually. I don't know if Case has that or not. I'd have to look. I don't think they did when I bought them, but it's been several years at this point. I'll have to look into that.
I don't think they do. There was someone else I think that does have one. I can't remember what brand it was, and I'm not even sure it was magnetic for sure. But but it is a really nice feature.
Yeah, that combo would be nice. Yeah, for sure. And then just the basics, like the other stuff we got on here, of course, a water bottle. And I think we had a couple.
And the water bottle is actually way more important. I've seen so many people get hot and tired on hikes, and I'll ask, "You got water?" "Oh, no, I didn't bring any water." So you really look like a person that should have some water.
Or I brought this little, plastic bottle of water, and I, slammed it. 2 hours ago, and I'm dying of thirst. So I think for the most part, our participants on our workshop are pretty good. But I know I sometimes, like if I'm just going out to the local park and I'm in a hurry, I have left my water bottle in the truck. And I've always regretted it. And especially if I were in some place like Utah, or like the first time I visited Bryce Canyon, and it was in the middle of summer, which was horrific. Amazing, but horrific. Definitely keep that water. Even in the Smokies, as humid as it was and all the rain we were getting, I was super thirsty that trip. I felt like I was chugging water nonstop. So definitely making sure you've got the water bottle. Again, even if you think it's just going to be a quick little thing, you never know. If you take the approach like Jeffrey and I do, where you're going out to wander and see what you see, that quick wander could turn into an hour very easily, or more. And then the last thing, we kind of touched on it. Well, we did touch on it from a camera and lens standpoint, but also from a bag standpoint, is rain protection. I've got the Shimoda bag, and you do too, right?
Yep, I'm Shimoda bag as well.
Yeah, so I've got the rain cover for it. Honestly, I've never used it. Even the Smokies, I thought maybe I would break it out, but at least the version 1 bag isn't officially rated as rain repellent, but I find it to be pretty decently rain repellent. I think probably the biggest failure point would be the zippers. But I've been out again in not downpours or anything, but steady to light rain, drizzle. I've been out with it in snow, and I've never had any issues with water getting into the bag. But I do carry that Shimoda rain cover just in case I get caught out in an unexpected downpour or something like that. I've got that kind of additional little peace of mind that I've got that protection there. I'm assuming you're the same on that one too.
Yep, I definitely have the rain cover stashed below the core unit, so it's always with me whenever I'm out. I tend not to put it on. Like you said, in the Smokies, we hit some drizzle and a little bit of light rain. I didn't bother with it at all for that. There have been times I've been caught in like a downpour, like literal downpour, that I'll put it on just because I don't want to push my luck with it. But it's never really been an issue. I have it for those downpours. I've been in a couple, and it does a great job for it. But a normal drizzle, light rain, snow, I trust the bag to keep things safe, and it always has so far. But it's there just in case, because sometimes, like I said, especially if you're wandering further away from the car, like, in the Smokies, we were doing a couple miles here or there, and you could be a little ways from the car, and if a downpour happened, at least you could throw the cover on it to help it stay dry in case you're worried. So I do recommend carrying one, even though my use of it's fairly infrequent. Yeah,
and we didn't list it on here, but for the days where there was a greater chance of rain, I know you had a bigger umbrella. I had a couple little pocket umbrellas that I would just throw in the top part of my bag. And, at least that way, if somebody didn't have a rain cover, you've got that umbrella. But I only carry those in a case of like that workshop where maybe somebody's got a bag that wouldn't be as resistant, or we know that there's a likelihood or a chance of rain in the area. Then I'll take it even on my own personal outings. But again, nice to have from that workshop leader's perspective too, to cover your clients.
Yeah, I carry. I don't know if I've ever carried an umbrella when it's just me, because I have my rain gear, I have my rain jackets, I have my camera set up, and so I have rain gear for me. And my wife makes fun of me because I'm not an umbrella user, just in normal day-to-day life, where she's breaking out an umbrella, and I'm like, just wear a rain jacket. But for workshops, if you're having a miserable time, sometimes just 5 minutes under an umbrella can really change your, I'm dry, because it can wear on you if you're not prepared or expecting it or just not used to being in it. So, and to Michael's point, I carry those big giant golf umbrellas. I get them dirt cheap from Home Depot. Home Depot sells them for like $6 or $8, and I go and buy 3 or 4 of them at a time, keep them in the Forerunner. They fit on the side of the pack nicely, and it's really just more for workshops where I know, yes, being sheltered for even 5 minutes can make a world of difference. Or we did have a case where we put the camera bags under the umbrella just because we were waiting to meet back up, and it was like, they're just sitting here. We'll put them there. So but it's not my normal course. But if you don't like rain or you're worried about rain and rain's what's keeping you from getting out, then grab a big umbrella. It's a totally valid way, and it can give you that little respite from the weather to keep you energized while you're out there.
For me personally, I'd rather just pop an umbrella open than mess with putting the rain cover on. So if I were really stuck in a downpour, that's probably the approach I would take. If I didn't have the umbrella, then I would pull out the rain cover. And one of our clients, I think it was that last overlook we were at where we kind of had the washout on it. She had the tripod mount for her umbrella.
Saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that.
Which I've always been intrigued by. I mean, it is one more thing to carry. If it was something like an overlook like that, then have it in the car at least. The thing that has always worried me about those is if there's any wind, or there's unexpected wind, you just added a huge sail onto your very expensive tripod and camera setup. So I would definitely say if you go that route, be conscious of when you're using it. I would, even if it was just slightly breezy, I don't think I'd be comfortable. And also, getting into the technical aspect, even if it is just slightly breezy and it's not putting your gear at risk of being blown over, it's still going to be introducing vibration and shake. So I would say you're less likely to be getting a clean shot versus just holding an umbrella over by with your hand and not having it on the camera or whatnot. But that is a clever idea, especially for those still moments where maybe you're going to be standing there for a little bit and you don't want to hold the umbrella the whole time, or as we said earlier, you can throw a microfiber cloth on top of your camera, but at some point it's going to get soaked if you're standing there long enough. So I can see a use case for it. I would just be very cautious about when I would choose to use that. We made note of a couple bonus items. I know you've got wired remote, right, for your Nikon?
I have a wired remote that I have just in case. I know you use what you'll get into a whole lot, your wireless remotes. I don't use a wired remote much. I mainly have it in case I find myself near seashore photography is what leaps to mind, where my exposure delay trick of delaying the shutter is not as great because I want to snap it just as a precise moment. So that's the biggest reason I carry it, just to be prepared for that event. But I know you can talk about your setup. I know you love it. And I will admit, after watching Michael work and he's 10 feet away from his camera, I'm just going to take that picture because he's got the scene set up. He can see the light crossing. I'll shut up because you should explain it. But I will admit a little bit of jealousy at your approach after seeing you work in the Smokies. So
this is probably the favorite thing I've bought. And I've got 2 of them now, one for each camera body. I've got the Canon BR-E1 wireless remotes, which, to Jeffrey's point, I can walk 10, 20, 30 feet away. If I'm sitting at a pullout or an overlook or something, I can pop open the tailgate on the back of the Forerunner and get some shelter from sun or maybe a little bit of drizzle or whatever, and just fire the shutter if the light hits what I want. Since I do have 2 of them, I put I took an X-Acto blade and put a little notch on the one button so that I know which is for which camera. But man, I use these, honestly, I can't think of a single shot in Smokies other than when I was shooting handheld, of course. But if I was set up on the tripod, I pretty much exclusively use the remotes, just simply because I don't have to worry about shake at that point, regardless of the focal length I'm at. To your point with the seascape stuff, you can use the delay timer, but if you're trying to catch a brief fleeting moment, even if you're not in a seascape, like we were standing at that one overlook and trying to get the dappled light on the landscape and that, some of that stuff can only last a second or two. So if you're using a 2-second countdown timer, by the time you press the shutter and it counts down, the moment's gone. Also, as I was pointing out to some of the clients that were kind of getting familiar with using the longer focal lengths in the 100 to 400 range, if you're out at 200, 300, 400 millimeters or beyond, that 2-second timer is probably not going to be enough to let the camera settle back down before the shutter is triggered. So you're still at risk of having some shake. in the frame and introducing some blurriness because of that shake. So you say, well, I can go to a 10-second timer. But again, if you're trying to shoot between the wind or catch that fleeting moment of light, or the rainbow that just popped up over there and you want to fire it off, you're not going to want to sit there for 10 seconds and wait for that to count down and having that anxiety and biting your nails that, is it going to count down before the moment ends? So whether you've got a wired remote, which I used to use, I looked into the wireless ones because the L brackets I use on my R5, it's really difficult to plug in the wired remote just with the design of the L bracket. I suspected I would like the wireless, but I did not suspect that. Like literally, if I don't have these with me, it's one of my greatest fears. Like this is almost the one thing I always triple check. Is it in my bag? Do I have my carabiner with my remotes on it? And because I've got them on a carabiner, I just loop them onto my belt loop. That's where they are all day. So I always know where they're at. I'm not having to hunt them or track them down in my bag. I don't have to worry about them falling out of my bag, or they're in my pocket and fall out, or I set them down somewhere. They're just always dangling at my hip. And like I said, I've got the one remote notched, and obviously I know I'm kind of talking from a place of privilege to be having two camera bodies, but I know the notch is for my primary with my 100 or 500. The smooth button is for my secondary camera, whether it's got the 14 to 35 or the 24 to 105. So as you can probably tell, I'm very excited about the wireless remotes that Canon has. And even if Nikon doesn't have a first party, or Sony, there's third party options. They are probably going to be bulkier because a lot of times you've got to attach something to the hot shoe, which does stink. Right. So that's what I love about these is they work seamlessly with the Bluetooth on the Canon cameras. So definitely love them so much.
Yeah, no, it was a nice setup. Made me a little jealous.
That's my aim. That's my goal.
You mentioned L bracket, and that ties into another one of our bonus items, L brackets on a camera. I get asked on workshops, what's that little thing on your camera? Mm-hmm. I have a 3-legged thing for one of my Nikons. It's orange, so it stands out in videos and when I'm using it. But an L bracket is super useful. And I think it's one of those underestimated accessories. I know even when I first got into landscape photography, I was like, why do I need this? I can just rotate my camera on the tripod head into the little notch and get from landscape to portrait view. But after using an L bracket, it gives you multiple attachment points for the camera. Gives you, even if you're in landscape mode, you've got a much bigger surface area to latch onto. So it's a little more efficient, faster in the field. And the biggest thing is if you're switching from a landscape orientation to that portrait orientation, you can just reclamp it, just tilt the camera. It looks like an L on the camera, and you get to keep your camera centered over the top of the tripod, and it doesn't disrupt your composition quite as much. You didn't tilt it and dip it. You just tilted it and are able to keep things centered. And for people on the video, watching the video version of this, Michael's sort of showing one off. Right here on camera,
Ryan too.
What one looks like, but go on, Mike. Like I know you and I are both huge fans of L brackets, so
yeah. And honestly, I was surprised. I guess that was a learning point for me with the workshop, and leading my first group workshop is probably did any of the attendees have an L bracket? Maybe one. I don't even know if
one or two. I think one or two. One did. Beyond that. I don't think so. We always had to rotate and dip, and then we had to recompose and stuff. And
yeah, so I was a little surprised by that. I guess I thought they were a little bit more common knowledge than maybe what they are. Maybe people don't see the value because they're not cheap. I mean, the ones I'm using for my R5s, I want to say are $150 each. I did go with a specific one because of the way the Canon screen is. Some L brackets, like what I have on my original R, I can't flip the screen out and rotate it all around. The L bracket gets in the way. So these are specifically designed for the R5 and the R6. Actually, this one works on either. You can still get the full movement of the screen. But yeah, to Jeffrey's point, you can reorient your ball head or whichever head you're using, but maybe you're wanting to switch back and forth between horizontal and vertical because you're not sure which you're going to end up liking the most. Now you've completely moved your ball head, and now if you want to go back to horizontal, you're probably not going to get it back to the same point. So it's just so much easier to just detach the Arca Swiss plate on the L bracket, flip the camera, and you're good to go. So I was surprised by the lack of really awareness. I don't feel like many of the attendees really were even familiar with like what it was or what the purpose of it was. So yeah, I would say that is definitely, it's a nice to have. You don't have to have it, obviously.
No.
But to me, it helps you work faster. It's easier. The nice thing, you look at this one that I've got on the R5 for those of you on video, like it's a little bulkier because it's the left-hand L portion of it's offset for the sake of the screen. That also gives me a secondary place to actually hold and carry the camera. So actually, I like that aspect of it too. So definitely, if you've never looked into it, definitely something to consider. And again, make sure you're getting one that's got the Arca Swiss attachment plate. That way,
Yes.
Assuming your tripod head is Arca Swiss compatible, you've got that set up there. So I think that covers it in terms of like, what should you always be bringing? What are some bonus items to consider? And then I think the last piece, and we've got some examples that aren't necessarily related to our experiences in the field. Well, some of them are, but also some other occurrences that have happened to others that speak to the importance of emergency preparedness. And like, first of all, for me and Jeffrey, leading a workshop in a national park on any kind of federal land and a lot of state parks and state land as well require workshop leaders or guides that you have first aid certification. In our case, first aid, CPR, and AED or artificial defib. So we had to have that. And, thankfully we didn't have anything serious happen. We did have one person fall and sprain a finger ligament, far from, being as bad as what it possibly could have been. But in that particular case, Jeffrey had a great set of walkie-talkies that he had brought, and we were using, but on that particular outing, we both left them in the truck. So we're along a stream with loud water and everything, and I'm trying to stay with the attendee or the participant who had just fallen and, was a little shook by I think fallen and what could have happened versus what actually happened. And I had no way to get in touch with Jeffrey to say, hey, I need some help down here, or, just to let him know as my co-leader what was going on. So definitely the walkie-talkies were huge between us as leaders, but also after you left, I ended up going out on a hike and a shoot with Brent Clark and didn't have your walkie-talkies anymore. And I didn't bring mine because mine, the ones I had were just pieces of junk that died, as I like to joke, in like 5 minutes, they would just die. So you had the Rocky Talkies.
Yep.
Fun play on words with walkie-talkie, which I have since ordered and are now sitting somewhere back behind me here, because they were great as workshop leaders and we could communicate while we were driving, kind of plan the next thing, et cetera, et cetera. There was that one session we went out where you took half the group, I took half the group. My group, we went up like another mile or so up the trail, but we were still able to communicate. And I had one participant that wanted to head back a little earlier before it started getting dark, and she got too tired. So I was able to let you know, hey, so-and-so's on their way, keep an eye out for them. So that was all great. But again, that example of me and Brent going out, didn't have the walkie-talkies, and we were shooting together, all well and good. We were able to communicate and, kind of keep an eye on each other. Well, then I was at a location that I had shot before, but wanted to reshoot it. And I told him about another location further up the trail that I thought was worth checking out, and I was going to take him to it. Well, he wanted to go on and go ahead on up to that. Okay, great. When I'm done here, I'll continue hiking on and I'll meet you up there. Well, I ended up where I was for longer than expected. He ended up going to that spot, but then also hiking much further up the trail beyond what he had expected. So I ended up hiking like an extra mile up trying to find him. And, did he slip? Is this worst case scenario?
Right.
Did he slip and fall in the stream and get swept away? Well, I was downstream, so I probably would have seen him, but what if he's lodged against a rock or a fallen tree? So, all these things start going through your mind, and I had no way to try to reach out and communicate with him, which is really what spurred me to go ahead and get the better set of the walkie-talkies. In the meantime, once I decided, I'm just going to hike back to the trailhead. Maybe he's already at his truck. Get back there. He's not. Well, I'm sitting there for like 5 minutes kind of hemming and hawing, like, do I hang out here longer? Do I go back up the trail and see if I run into him? Finally, here he comes hiking to the trailhead. And we're both kind of like, oh, thank God you're okay, because he's thinking that something maybe happened to me. I'm worried something's happened to him. The walkie-talkies would have solved that problem. Kudos to you, man. Those Rocky Talkies, ROCKY, just like Rocky Mountains.
Yep.
Rocky Talkies, those things were fantastic. Great battery life, great sound quality, great range. especially for the locations we are in. So yeah,
I thought they did
great.
really well, and they were super nice to have. And like you said, I think we only recharged them once over the course of like the 9 days we were out there.
Yep.
And in given the conditions, the Smokies, lots of foliage, lots of moving water, lots of inclines. I thought their range was pretty good. There's a couple times it got a little scratchy, but I think like you wouldn't want to carry on a lengthy conversation over them, but I think you could get through in an emergency case simple phrases to just let someone know something is wrong and get enough communication to figure out, am I moving towards you or are you coming towards me type situation. So they definitely proved their value on that trip. I've used them on other workshops, and I know even the morning you and I went out when it was just us, we left them in the trucks because we're like, oh, it's just us. We'll be close enough. And there were times, it wasn't as bad as your and Brent's situation, but it would have been nice to be able to say, hey, I'm just ahead of you a little bit to do. So I think they have their place, and we're certainly worthwhile. And
or even beyond an emergency, like let's say we had been in Cades Cove and we stopped at a big meadow and you went this way and I went the other way. And one of us comes across an amazing scene. We're like, oh my God, I should get Jeffrey here.
Yes.
Being able to just, hey man, you need to get your butt over here. This is incredible, whatever. So it's not just an emergency standpoint. To me, that's obviously the biggest value of them, but there's other benefits to them too. I wouldn't take them out, obviously, if I was by myself, but I really do think if I'm going out with even one other person, I probably will make sure I've got those with me just in case we split up or get split up somehow. And we need to keep that line of communication open. Cool. So we talked about our first aid certifications. Honestly, having gone through it now, I built it up as like this big thing. Oh my God, what if I fail? It's not, you have to know it, but it's not AP algebra.
No.
But I would say, like, having gone through it now, like, I'm kind of thankful I have it, not just from a photography standpoint, lean workshops, but I'm kind of glad I got it just from a general day-to-day life standpoint. And we were joking yesterday, actually, I ran into a scenario where somebody needed a Band-Aid. I was like, I'm first aid certified. And I've got my kit. Let me go get my kit. So speaking of the first aid kits, that's the other piece is you and I think, both have one for keeping in our truck. And then we've got a smaller one that we carry in our bags. I had asked you yesterday what you carry because I've been feeling for a while, and especially after going through the first aid training, that at least the one in my bag is probably lacking in a few things. It's been a long time since I've even gone through it. So I guess why don't you talk to, or if you want to talk to, the kits you've got and kind of the essentials that you make sure are in them, more so probably from what's in your bag standpoint. We can talk about car camping and that stuff later, but I'll let you take that one since you've got a little bit more experience. And you had a doctor scold you apparently about needing more stuff.
Yep. I've been on workshops before where a doctor along was like, you should probably carry more stuff. That I didn't. So I have one of the, I think it's one of the adventure medical kits. REI sells them, and there's different sizes. They have like a hiker version, a mountain version, and like a guide version, I think. And I'm just using a hiker version, which is like sort of it's geared for 2 people, 2 days. And I figure for how I'm using it, I'm never going to be away from the vehicle more than an hour or so, most likely, maybe a couple hours. So I really just need enough to get back to my Forerunner. And my goal is to be able to get me or someone in my workshop back to the Forerunner, where I will cover what's in the Forerunner another time, but a more extensive first aid kit with even more items in it. But it's a small kit, and I've got the typical Band-Aids, bandages, antiseptic. I even have little ibuprofen packets, so that way if someone has a headache or allergy or anything like that in there. And bandages, different types of bandages, not just the Band-Aids, but ones that could handle a larger cut, things like that. I have safety pins in there just in case. I have a syringe in there just more to irrigate a wound with clean water. So if you get cut on the trail or something like that, there's not always a lot of clean things around, but with the syringe, you can squirt and get the debris out of the wound before you start trying to put gauze on it or stop any kind of bleeding or anything like that. It's not a super complex kit. I've added my kit in the bag didn't used to have cold compresses, but I've started carrying those because just in the past couple of weeks I've needed to use those multiple times. And so it's just those little chemical packets. It's similar to a heat packet that you break, and it provides some cold relief for a little bit. So I have those as well. But it's a fairly basic kit. My premise being for how I'm using it, I'm not a multi-day hike. I'm probably at most an hour or 2 up the trail, and I need to be able to handle whatever could happen in that hour or 2 to get someone back to the Forerunner, where if I needed more stuff, I've got even more stuff in the Forerunner. But that's my approach. It's small, fits in there. It's handy, but it's just those bare essentials, basic meds.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, kind of going back to, we could have very well had a need for it with that one client that fell early on in the workshop. Thankfully, it wasn't any worse and we didn't. But then you also go to just the other scenarios that may just come up in life. And, there was another workshop leader with another group that we were talking to, and they came upon a really bad accident, and, car had flipped after running off the road. And there wasn't really anything for them to do in terms of stabilizing the person, but at least they were trained and ready to ask the appropriate questions and check on them, et cetera, et cetera. And then just yesterday, I saw a case where another photographer, I want to say it was Taylor Stone. If not, I apologize, but she was going out on a hike and they encountered somebody that had been like basically, limping or dragging their leg back, throughout the night or whatever, because they had severely injured themselves. And they were in an area without any kind of cell phone coverage or anything like that. Taylor had her Garmin GPS satellite tracker, which is a segue to the next item here. So Taylor had a Garmin satellite tracker on her and was able to initiate the SOS sequence on that and get emergency responders out to assist this hiker who had been injured. They obviously didn't have anything like that with them. So here's somebody that was out on their own, got pretty badly injured from the sounds of it, and had no way of getting help, which is the main reason that I've always carried the Garmin. Is it gives me that peace of mind for Heather, my fiance, back at home. It gives her the peace of mind that if something happens, I've got that on me. Also, just if I'm camping somewhere without cell signal, I can at least send, some messages back and forth via text to let her know I'm okay, let her know where I'm at. If I'm getting ready to go on a hike, a lot of times I'll just shoot a quick message. Hey, I'm at such and such a trailhead. I'm heading north, or, whatever. But again, if you run into a scenario where that unexpected happens, it's one of those things like, maybe you're never going to need the SOS feature of it. But if you ever do, boy, are you sure as hell going to be glad that you got it. Or if you encounter somebody else, like the scenario I was just talking about, that desperately needs it, and they don't have it, but you do, you're going to be very thankful, and you've got the potential to maybe save somebody else's life, or at least get them help that they need sooner than later, so that they're not at further risk. So definitely Garmin. I've got the older, larger one. I think you've got the Mini, which I kind of wish I had gone with myself. They both.
I've got the Mini.
And the reason I would say I wish I had the Mini is when I got mine, I was thinking, oh, well, I'm not as used to like using waypoints to track locations and that. So I want the bigger screen to message and, view the map and all that stuff, except that I never use the screen on the actual satellite tracker. It syncs up with Garmin's EarthMate app. So I do all my messaging through the app. I do my mapping through the app and the whole bit. So it's just, it's syncing via Bluetooth with the tracker. So that's where I wish I had the Mini. It would take up a heck of a lot less space and be good to go. But whether you get the Mini, the larger one, Garmin, or something else, again, just from a worst case scenario, what if, definitely recommend something you consider, especially if you do go out hiking on your own, backpacking certainly on your own, anywhere without cell phone coverage. Definitely recommend it. And that is another segue into something you and I both tested while we were in the Smoky Mountains without cell phone coverage. There's been a lot of chatter about iPhone and the new satellite, the ability to text via satellite and send your location and SOS and all that. I would say it's great to have in a pinch, but it is a pain to use because it's not. So the Garmin, like I can have it in my chest strap on my bag, and it's going to get signal if somebody messages me or if I fall and I can't get it out or whatever, but I can get in there and at least flip the cover open and hit the SOS. Like odds are it's going to have signal and, it'll connect to the satellites and send it off. But the iPhone one, you got to hold the iPhone up, let it figure out where the satellite is. And apparently there's like one satellite circling the Earth for it. Probably more, but it feels like one.
Right.
Figure out where it is, trying to turn left or right, find it, hold still, let it connect. And then as you're trying to use it, the satellites continue to move. So at some point you got to make sure you're kind of turning and tracking with it, which it's doable. Like for text messaging, okay, it's fine. It is frankly annoying, but it's workable.
It's usable, right?
It's usable. I would not want to rely on it for an SOS emergency situation.
No, because like you said, you could have fallen.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I agree with you. I have way more faith that the Garmin is actively working to stay connected to satellites on its own without my involvement. And yes, there might be a delay while it tries to get that satellite, but I don't have to hold it or stand in some goofy position to do it.
Or spin around in a circle.
Right, exactly. Whereas with the iPhone, it was like I had to hold it up a little bit, hold it in a direction. You had to move as a satellite moved. And while it was convenient to send a quick text message, it could be hours before I remembered, oh, yeah, I should probably try to reconnect because I've lost my connection.
Yes, that is the biggest thing. Yeah.
Yes.
So
that part was annoying to me.
Right. So with the Garmin, I can give my Garmin number out and Heather can message me. You could have messaged me from another Garmin. Somebody back in town with a signal could have text messaged me and would have come through to my Garmin. And again, I'm not having to actively search and connect to a satellite. It's just the messages are going to come in when it comes in. And it's not quick, but it will get to me. With the iPhone, let's say there's an emergency back home, or you're trying to communicate with emergency responders, and to Jeffrey's point, it loses that connection. You're not going to get any inbound messages until you actively position yourself and the phone to reconnect or to figure out where the satellite is, realign yourself, get it connected, make sure you're not letting it move out of range.
Yep.
And, if you're injured, that's, again, a huge problem. But to me, the bigger thing is, again, like, if you don't think to do that, you're never going to get that inbound message. It's a totally active process of connecting. Whereas with the Garmin, it's pretty much passive. Yes, there are times, like if I'm inside my truck, it may not get through the metal. But even there at night, like I just put it up on top of my sunshade for my sunroof. And as long as it's up there, I know I can be in the back of the truck and I can send a message off. I'll receive messages and all that stuff. So yes, the iPhone, it's good that it's there. Certainly good that it's there, but never would I recommend relying on it from an emergency. Like there's a true emergency, you need an SOS or whatever the scenario might be. Definitely would not rely upon it there. Maybe someday it'll get there, but right now, way too much fussing about to get connected, stay connected, receive inbound messages. It's certainly not just not the Garmin's plug and play, but similar concept.
Right.
Like turn it on, you're probably going to be good to go.
Yep, I agree with that.
So this is far longer episode. This went on longer than we anticipated. Here I was worried, like, man, this thing's going to be like 20 minutes long, and we're well over an hour. I would again say to our listeners, to our viewers, if there's something you got a question about or something you like to carry with you, either from a convenience standpoint, photography, or from a safety standpoint, by all means, we can even get into like, I carry a compass with me. On that compass is a little whistle. So, there's also other things beyond just what we covered here. If you've got questions, if you got stuff that you carry yourself that you want to share, head to our Patreon and leave it as a comment on the episode post, and we can either discuss it in a future episode or just make note of it, and it's out there for other members to see. The community aspects of Patreon, free for anybody. All you'd have to do is become a free follower, essentially, of our Patreon or of the Shutter Nonsense Patreon, and you'll be able to interact with us and communicate. Things like if we do monthly Q&A sessions or live stream, stuff like that, that'll be the stuff that's kind of above and beyond extra for paid members. But we want the community to be able to participate, whether you're a paid member or just a free follower on Patreon. I think at this point, let's shut up. I can already feel my throat getting a little scratchy, as it always does when I talk a lot. And until next time, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and take care.
Thanks, everybody.